Good day, everybody. Tracy Brown here. Hope you're having a great day. And I just wanted, I'm not sure, I guess this is hearable. I'm not sure how loud this volume is, but anyway. I wanted to get back to my series on unpacking the intuitive eating principles. I'm going to do another unpacking about a different non-diet book here, I think this summer, but for now, I think let's finish up our intuitive eating book and around what I see. The purpose of this series is really talking about here are the principles, which are really great, and they're great guideposts, and this is how I educate my clients on them. And if I haven't mentioned this in their videos, I actually don't go through the principles with clients. I recommend the book, but since if people come to me one-on-one, they get individual attention, of course, so I don't actually go through the principles at all. I weave them in and out of our work in just a very organic kind of way, and the reason I do that is because I just wasn't trained to use those principles. One, because the book was barely out back then. I didn't personally use those principles to recover and learn how to eat more normally. It was a book I read at the beginning of my training, like, oh, well, this makes sense. I was doing this stuff, and I'm so glad that here's a guidebook to do it, because that wasn't available in the the mid 90s. I think it may have been first written, but I didn't have access to it. It literally was like one, bookstore in my area and didn't have the book. So anyway, thank you anybody who's watching live. I really appreciate seeing you. Hi, Elizabeth. So there's a little bit of a beginning to this video. If you want to go back and watch it later, that'd be great. So this is the principle I think is probably one of the most difficult. I know the food rule one is really difficult for people too, but this one I think has the most confusion and the most fear, because, and the one I want to take a little bit more on time probably to unpack than the rest. Unconditional permission to eat. Now, it's 100% right and great in theory, and I think for probably the vast majority of clients, it works and there's no fallout from it. I was really lucky when I did my recovery that I was young and, honestly, besides the malnourishment, relatively healthy, and I didn't really I had a minor pushback in terms of my body chemistry. I actually had high cholesterol probably for about a year after I had started doing intuitive eating. It did normalize out. That's hard to know whether it was the food or if it was the rebound effect from, honestly, kind of being malnourished for that handful of years I was before I started intuitive eating and eating with more permission. It's hard to know. That happens in anorexics sometimes, that they have high cholesterol a year or so after they start getting renourished. Some people that have high cholesterol when they're malnourished. So it's tricky to know. And for me personally, at the time I was doing it, trying to eat with full permission, I was also binging at the same time and over-exercising. All of those factors, for me, overexercise really throws my body into a lot of imbalance. So it's honestly hard to know. And that's what's tricky about eating with full permission. Our clients are going to think, oh my gosh, it's the food. I'm eating all the food. But if we don't unpack their food carefully to see how they're eating, most of the time when I find the unconditional permission to eat phase of things, there's also emotional eating going on, deprivation-driven eating still going on. And they're overshooting. People oftentimes are overshooting the fullness sometimes too. So it's really tricky. And I think that's why when you see people come to you and they've been doing this and they're freaked out, it's because there's still a lot of chaos going on. And that's why they're so scared. Especially if they're doing intuitive eating and they happen to be doing this phase of the process and they're getting blood work done and lab work done, they're going to be pretty freaked out that this doesn't work. So we're going to have to explain a lot of the nuance of this. We're going to need to explain, like, unconditional permission to eat doesn't necessarily mean that we abandon all physical signals, or that we abandon what's going on in our bodies. It's so difficult, and I think that's why I personally think that most people probably should be going through this process with somebody, because unless you've got a lot of inner self-soothing and stability, and you can handle the ups and downs of the unknown in this process, it's really hard to do and not go back to dieting. This part's really tricky. So I just want to share that with you. That's why people get so scared and start to think it doesn't work. You all know that I run that big intuitive eating group, and I see it every day, all day long. Like, people private message me every day, like, I'm doing this process, I'm eating all the food, and my sleep apnea is worse, my cholesterol is worse. Some people share that things are better, and I suspect, and the people that say things are like their blood works better, they're really a little bit more in tune with hunger and fullness and getting that more honed and accurately. I think the people who are struggling are people who aren't. In fact, I kind of did a little bit of free coaching with a lady yesterday, a private message, because she was like, oh my gosh, it was a CPAP, like, I'm doing intuitive eating and all my symptoms are worse, and I have to go to the doctor and they're going to tell me to lose weight. And I kind of coached her through a little bit, and she finally came around to saying, like, yeah, I'm actually doing probably some like overshooting with my fullness, and sometimes I'm still eating because I don't think I should, or there's emotional eating in there. So she's not really true in intuitive eating yet, which is so tricky, because it's like we don't want to teach people the hunger fullness diet, but to be honest, when we are in bodies that have needs and maybe some sensitivities, there may be impact from kind of just eating all the food whenever you feel like it, possibly past fullness. And if we're doing that often enough, there may be some side effects. So the truth is that things do settle out, but for some people, before they settle out, there's things like this that can happen, and that's where people get freaked out. And that's why people really need that deep attention with their food, and to really have somebody walk them through. They need some containment. It's tricky because, again, we all get, when we're doing this process at the beginning, we're all like scared to death of containment, and we don't want it, but pretty much everybody needs some of it. So I hope I'm not rambling, because it's very delicate, I'll be honest. And as much as I try to repeat it, it's still, unless you're working with somebody that's why I'm constantly repeating that we don't want to turn intuitive eating to the hunger fullness diet, but we need some containment, especially if you have if you're just feeling out of control. When I say you, I'm talking to your clients. If you're feeling out of control, don't know where your edges are, do have some health concerns that are real, that, probably constantly grazing or pushing past fullness or eating foods that cause a lot of physiologic symptoms are going to impact health. And so we can't deny that, but we also need to help them, like, and that's true. And what is your capacity to, if you were to say no to certain foods, what would happen? It's almost like the cost benefit is doing a little bit of this now, tolerating these symptoms over here. Is it worth just kind of pushing through this process for you? Or do we need to take it a little slower and really nuance it? And honestly, before there was this big argument on turning, not argument, but like this big thing of turning it into the hunger fullness diet, which people are going to do if they're not really having the nuance of things. That's why, again, because I don't teach principles that much, I just kind of, here's the book, I recommend it, read it or don't, to get some guidelines and a little bit of background of this process. This is why you all are so important to be out there sharing this information of, like, some people come in with health concerns, and so we are tailoring this process to their needs, and we're kind of like skipping and doing the pieces of the book that are necessary for this person to get some stability, and then they can read the rest and see, like, oh yeah, I still got to clean up this little part, but it's not so what's the right word? There's not so much chaos for them. We want to, like, contain the part for them that feels like the most worrisome, and then the other ones kind of fall into place with a little less what's the right word? I don't know. Sorry, I'm rambling. I'm just trying to think of the right ways. Like, when you kind of fill in the place that feels the most distressing to them and contain that, the other ones kind of fall into place a lot easier for them. So I just want you to be thinking about it as you teach these principles, and whatever way you do it, that for some people, unconditional permission to eat, they're going to have a big old pendulum swing that might result in some symptoms that scare them a ton, and so they need the containment around that. And when you see people online, encourage them, like, hey, unconditional permission to eat doesn't necessarily mean that you eat foods that are going to really bother you, but we need to figure out how to eat these foods in a way that works for you. And or are you feeling like that all the times of the day, the week, whatever, most of the time, are you eating within, comfortable hunger and comfortable fullness and stuff like that? And if the answer is no to that question, that's probably what's causing the possible struggles with their health or whatever, and symptoms, and that needs to be addressed. It's not so much that they're doing something wrong with the permission to eat part. So I hope this video helps to really unpack a little bit of what you're going to see people struggle with. This is, I think, again, one of the hard, I sucked at the beginning of this video, it's going to be one of the harder principles for people to really get a grasp on in a non-diet way, just because it's going to bring up so much stuff around need, around permission, around worthiness, around knowing our edges. There's a lot of factors in it. It's not just like eat what you want, because most people just can't I'm going to stop a diet or stop binging today, and I know exactly what my comfortable fullness is, and I honor that most of the time. There's going to be a lot of experimentation with that, and I think that people overshoot a lot more than they think they do at the beginning, and that can be scary. So, and they make it about it's the food, it's the bad food. It's like, no, we're still working on actually knowing those edges and what your body can deal with. So anyway, I encourage you all with this video and with this work to really, with your individual clients, with the blog posts you write, talk about the nuances. Go deeper than just talking about the principles, but talk about the nuances. You can take these principles and the things that people say in session with you and really just break it down to, that's why I never run out of things to talk about. There's so much to talk about. If you could take one sentence in that book and create a whole blog post out of it, and in your own experience with clients or your own, and create something really impactful for people. So thanks so much for watching. If this was beneficial to you, let me know about it. If there's a piece that I missed in that of your own experience or your client work, let me know. Let's make a discussion about it. And I hope you all have a great day. Take care. Bye.